encourage mutual solidarity within the workers. They should encourage them to work together and to also understand what it means to make profit in order to then also then be into the project. Adopt notions like the value of time, of money, and of saving. I don't know well enough the Vietnamese context, but I think this was probably what after turned against the French, because it organized the communist proletariat that then made the independence. This is still to look. May I show you a short movie? It's a movie from the official archives. It's a movie from 1934. It will speak French, but it's 1 minute, so I will try to speak at the same time in English. Now we have the song, we miss the picture. Maybe? We don't need the volume because it will be again the music and sound. So the movie is called The Great French Colonial Piece of Work Has Been Achieved. The junction from Brazzaville to Pointe-Noire, Congo River to the ocean has been realized. After 13 years of work, started in 1921, it took 13 years to build 610 kilometers of railways and overcome the difficulties of an unhealthy and uneven region.
Et faire 10 millions de mètres cubes de terrassement. 930 millions ont été dépensés pour cette œuvre qui a permis de...
Okay, and you have the pictures. 610 kilometers of railways and overcome the difficulties of an unhealthy and uneven region. 92 bombs were used, 10 million cubic meter of leveling, 130 millions were spent for this piece of work that made possible to connect directly the river to the ocean. It is not only a progress for the development and improvement of the French colonies, but also an improvement of the destiny of the indigenous people of Equatorial Africa. So this is a propaganda movie of the 30s. There are many of these propaganda movies. It still exists. We can still find them. Where is it? Isn't that document somewhere? The document should be open somewhere. Ah, yes, oh, sorry, thank you. Yeah. I want you to point something that, according to me, is important. The colonial project was never a consensus. That means at any time there were also always some resistance. Of course, locally, but also within France. For example, same year this propaganda movie was made, Albert Long wrote a book that's called Land of Ebony, in which is denouncing the working conditions that are made to the workers on these railways. And after this, it was proven that this building site was made on imposed labor, with a death rate that was 58%. So some historians now are still working to make this recognized, because some scientists have already shown the problem really long ago, but there is no recognition of the history and also no reparation. In 2014, a group gathered of black people living in France together, and they sued the French company SPIE Bâtiment, the same company that made the bridge we saw before in Indochina. And then the president at this time, François Hollande, said there will not be economical reparations for this history. And he also advocated the people to stop to talk about this history and to build together peaceful and reconciliated history. The actual director of the company, Jean Monville, declared in the newspaper in 2013. He writes an article and he speaks about the pride of what we did in the past, our professionalism and our commitment to overseas adventures. So this tension is still here in France. It's the colonial past is not worked in France enough. We don't agree on it. I would say at this level there is no bridge. This question of bridge is interesting, I think. If you are interested in your own researches on bridges, on the material level or also symbolical level, I recommend you two things. A movie that I don't want to screen now because I want to go further, but it's I can leave it maybe to your choice. It's a 4-minute movie putting together pictures of like all the bridges that were built overseas by the French. It's made by a French artist from nowadays who works on like the transmission of colonial history and hospitality. What does it mean, hospitality with this past? And I like to screen this movie to my students, and at the same time I read them a text from a German sociologist or philosopher, depends, we'll talk about him, Georg Simmel, who you might know, maybe, I don't know. He wrote a text in 1909, which is called Bridges and Doors. And that's, according to me, a good text. If you can read it in German, it's the best. The translation, they got a bit older, but interesting, we can read it. And in this text is asking the reader, what are we connected to, what are we parting from, what do we connect in imagination and for real? Because to build a bridge, it's at the same time something you need to make with your imagination, but also for real. It goes together somehow. This text is good. Yeah, very fancy. I'm talking about imagination because, like you said, Joyce, before in your class, colonization is not only a matter of taking the land. I don't know, this can probably be a discussion, but I envision imperialism as the imagination of the colonizing or appropriating processes. And in that sense, imperialism is not like Anne McClintock quotes it. It's not something that happened outside the West. That's something that happened everywhere. And this imperialism, it has to be deconstructed from different sides. And also within the metropolis context, the imperialism was a way to leave less space to middle class categories, to dangerous class, the working class, she speaks from the English context, so she will quote the Irish, but in France we would say the Basque or the one from Britain. This will be more or less the same. Prostitutes, feminists, gay and lesbian, criminals, militant, etc. They were categories that were also made more marginal, pushed like in corners because of imperialism. I think I don't have time for this, so I will just show this to you. I will not show you the extract of the movies, but I recommend you these movies. You might know the one on the left, Shanghai Express, because it's really famous. And I picked this movie because in the first 5 minutes, just watch the first 5 minutes, you don't need to go further. I think it's a picture of what was civilization at this time. We have all the details, the gloves, not to see the hands, the prostitute women because independent, the doctor who is the most intelligent one, etc., etc. The people smoking, and always the opening the door. This is if you watch the whole movie. Opening the door, closing the door, opening the curtain, closing the curtain. What's the limit between public, private, etc. It's a really interesting movie. And something that's also interesting in this movie is that, like, even though it's called Shanghai Express, it's supposed to play in China. Of course, no one. I think what is said to be Chinese is no language. Do you know this movie? Someone can say this to me? I think it's no language, it's just some sounds. And it's, of course, not translated. So, according to me, it also shows this part of imperialism that is like, we set a story somewhere, and we use the somewhere as just like a scenery for our life. And I think this movie shows really well what was imperialism. Second movie, I saw that at least as a book it's translated in Chinese, it's called Momo. And this also, if you have a bit some time to lose, I would really recommend you to read this book. This is coming from a German writer, 73. And The undertitle is Momo, or the strange story of the time thieves and the child who brought the stolen time back to the people. And it's like a tale playing in the village, and the story shows that it's telling about the value of time, how time became something valuable, and how time became something that has to be measured all the time. That means we might lose some time. The film and the book are exploring this use of time, and I think it's interesting because I also need to work deeper on this, but according to me, the railways also brought this value of time everywhere around the world. And when I found this store in Taiwan, but I found more or less the same in Istanbul this summer. That means the train is attached to the time, and the train has to go on time. But this idea to be on time is also like a way to transform time into a value that will be a limit in the daily life of everyone. So this I will explore a bit more later. I'm interested in this. Let's move back to Saint-Étienne-Lyon. And I told you already, 38, the company becomes public, and then in the 50s the train is not a great project anymore because it's the car, and the interest for the train comes back in the 80s with the high-speed train and the electricity. So I don't know if you remember the map from before 1860. It's the same, more or less. The map of a local train in 1860 and high-speed train in nowadays is the same. The star around Paris, always. And you see also the regions where there is no high-speed train. They are the non-developed regions of France. It's rural areas. Yes, I found a document, but I haven't translated it because it's too technical and boring for you. But it's a document from 38. It explains why the train has to become nationalized. And I was really astonished because the arguments are exactly, but really point by point, the same as the ones that I use nowadays to say that it should be privatized. Exactly the same arguments, just reverse direction. And I think actually it doesn't appear really different when the train company is run by private or public companies. It appears more or less the same in the past and let's say in the future. One element that's already the same is that the directors from the French railway companies were always coming from the same school. That it was public or private, doesn't change it. And this school is the Parisian Polytechnique, which is famous in the country and I guess abroad. It's one of the most prestigious and selective public French scientific and engineering schools. This is something I want to mention because it's not known and I think it's important, and this is another research I conducted. In France we have two parallel systems of studies. There is a system that's like the university, a bit like you have elsewhere, and another system that's called Grande École, which are also some kind of universities that are sponsored also by the state. They are public also institutions, but most of the time they are really elitist and they only concern the upper class people. And the system are really parallel. So, Polytechnique is a Grande École. One former student from this Grande École Polytechnique, he made the studies, Nicolas Bercouk. He conducted a research in sociology between 2013 and 2016 to show the reproduction of the elite. Because it is only like 15% of, yes, the school opened to women in 1972 only, but until now they are between 15 and 20% only. And he also shown that when in the average population of France the amount of workers is 17.8%, the amount of working class people in this school is 1.1. So this is a really unegalitarian school compared to others. I am how to say, pushing this idea. I started, but I also think it's not interesting for you. But in the French context, it is. Just to tell, I'm drawing a map of the different presidents of the company, because the interesting thing is to see the connections they have. That means at different time of their career, where they work for what, and because they more or less work in all the different public sectors during their career. That means they can be in the post office company, the petrol company, electricity company, trading companies, which actually makes at any time, it's not many people doing all these policies. They are like a bunch of men. And I find it interesting to link it together. And of course, these people are also the richest of France. They were law limiting their salaries in 2014, and now their salaries are limited at 60 million Taiwanese dollars. 60 millions per year. Which, just to get to some comparable numbers, it's 375 times the minimum salary, which is in France 42,000 Taiwanese dollars. The interesting thing is that this topic of the high salaries, or the fact that the elite reproduce itself within some schools, is never a topic in the mainstream media. It's not something that is discussed in France. The only topic that comes to the media when we speak about a railways company, it's the strikes. And the strikes are the only matter talked, even though it's never said why the people strike. It started now 10 years ago that the strikes are considered and named hostage taking, and this started in 2006 to use this name for strikes, hostage taking, which is a strong expression. And in 2007, the president of this time, Nicolas Sarkozy, implemented a rule to keep a minimum service during the strikes. That means you need to declare in advance that you will strike, like this they can manage the people and they can organize that there will always be trains running. The train company has also other companies, bus companies, etc., including a car share company. With the last strike last spring, the workers, the railway workers, they conducted a strike between March to June, 3 days per week. They gave the program in advance. And at this time, the car share company was sending to each phone, when we had the app, messages. Each day they were strike to say us will never strike. This strike this last year It was because now the market will become private, and the one working for the railways, they have a special statute. That means they leave earlier for retirement because they have difficult working conditions. They have also some economical bonuses, and they have the right, for example, for their family to travel for free or almost for free. Some rights like this. In the media, they were pictured like the privileges once. And this was repeated during the 3 months of strikes. And privilege in French, it refers to the nobility in the French Revolution. It's really strong, the word privilege. And it was said that they need to adjust to a time and economy. They had to start to have their privilege. And I think it's a good example of what Thiong'o called capitalist fundamentalism. That means when it's considered and said that there is only one destiny, that it's the same for all, and that we have no choice. This is exactly the definition of a fundamentalism. Two scandals happened in the train company. They were barely reported in the media. First scandal was about Jews deportation during World War II. The railway company deported 76,000 Jews to in between 1942 and 1944. This was recognized with apologies of the director in 2011. And this was made because in Maryland, US company refused to sign a contract with the French company and threatened to pursue the company. Then they apologized and they decided to pay reparation to the concerned families, $60 million. Short detour, but important one. It's in the great book of Hannah Arendt, Eichmann in Jerusalem, it shows that Jews were protected by their nationality. And in several contexts, we can see that the nationality tends to protect the people. But now, in the 21st century, there are in the world more refugees than French since last year. 67 million refugees. It's only 66 French in the world. So that means it's 67 million people that doesn't benefit this protection of the citizenship. Hannah Arendt was already thinking about this at this time, and she was thinking what happened to the Jews was not only a problem of Jewish people, but also a problem of people who have no state, no protection from the nation state. I think this is really interesting to think in different contexts. But yeah. And within the French context, it's complicated, this story, because there is a competition of victims, and between the victims of slavery and colonization and the victims of World War II. And like you see in this case, the state right away gave some compensation, when, for example, on the train we saw before, it was said no compensation. So this is increasing a stupid but really difficult competition with you out of the context. I can speak really nicely about it. You don't react. In my class it will be already such a mess. Because really the people have like, it's full of emotion, this competition. And this is especially playing on the context of Israel-Palestine. So this is a topic that is completely taboo and difficult in the French context. Yeah. Last thing concerns the Shibani. Shibani is Arabic word to say it means grey hair. And it's how we refer to the people, mostly men, who came from northern Africa to work right after the decolonization. Because at this time, in the 60s and 70s, many French companies went to northern Africa to hire people. They came to France, this was until 1960s until 1973. The French company did it also, and they hired 2,000 Moroccans to work in France. So they made their career in France. And in autumn 2017, so it's really recent, they conducted a court case against the company, and they won. They won the court case because actually they were not paid the same. They had to work 10 years longer than the other people. They were not allowed to study and access to internal promotions like other workers, and their pension was lower. So finally the French railway company was condemned for discrimination and paid them some compensation. Since its foundation in 1938, we find back discourses about the fact that the company has made a loss. And the fact that the company has made a loss is always what will justify the next change. And nowadays it's the argument to open the market to competition. I don't want to talk about everything now, it's too much, but just go to the example of the stations. They build a company that is only taking care of the stations. That means the stations, they all belong together and they are not attached to the train anymore. This in the last 10 years. And this company is called Gare et Connexion, Gare and Connections, Stations and Connections. It was launched in 2009, but it appeared in the public space only 3 years ago. Their slogan is let's create a new experience in the station, and their motto is bring more well-being in people's life. You read this on their website. The president is called Patrick Roper, the actual one, and he wrote a book that's called City Boosters, in English and French, I mean. And according to him, stations have to become hubs, city boosters within the competition between megapolis. And then this program already started, and we can see in the main Parisian stations that the stations are becoming really luxury. A lot of they open luxury shops, for example, in the Northern Station, which is a beautiful building we saw before.
Could you answer? We have
Yeah.
Oh no, it should be okay.
No, it's just because I want to move it. And yes, I'm wondering about this program because they will open also a high-standing gym club in another station in Paris. In Montparnasse, Gare de Montparnasse, south of Paris. There they will open a restaurant, like a grande cuisine française, and they already said the lunch will be 120 euros, which is $4,280 lunch. And it appears that everywhere around the country, that was the station in the 80s. Now. So it appears all around the country that the stations tend to be attached to business and upper class living standards. Always more. And the problem is that everyone is not rich in France, because like now you see, up you have the station of Lyon, and down you have like what you see when you come out of the station in Saint-Étienne. But this is the next street. Like left it's Lyon and right it's Saint-Étienne. And I mean it's a district with many lower class or poor people living, and the question is that what will be their experience of the station? How will it be possible to take a train? Some French sociologists, Dominique Mémy, Tayeb and Ravenot, launched a call for paper now, and it will be a conference in summer. I hope I can join them. It seems really interesting because they show that in the public space in France it's less and less allowed to be illegitimate. That means if your body is not fitting into the norms, you don't have your space anymore. That means the level of disgust is like increasing towards certain bodies, and that means certain categories of people. And then my concern is that if there is so much difference in between the real population who wants to have this experience of just taking the train, and the stations that are becoming like these palaces with like high standard cuisine, that means how the people will be filtered not to enter into the stations. And this is an experience that we are already facing on the railway that I'm taking several times per week. That means in the week I see all of these policemen and women, and most of the time they are all at the same time in the same place. The only ones that tends to be surprised are the inspectors of trains. That means now they opened a new video surveillance center in the main station of the region, and they changed the communication. They used to write, "You are in a space. You are in a video watched space. This is the law." Now they change the communication and they say, "You are in a video protected space." This makes really a difference how you experience the camera and also the police around you or the military. And when you look at the investment in between 2015 and 2021, it's 85 millions. That means 3 million NTD dollars that were invested into security in the region, just in the region. So I think we are getting tired. But let's then finish on this. And Sarah Ahmed, in this book, The Cultural Politics of Emotion, is talking about impressions. That means how I get impressed and what are the impressions I give to the others. And when they build this new center for video surveillance, video monitoring, they say we need to watch stations because they are, in French they say zone sensible. Sensible, in English it would mean sensitive and remarkable at the same time. And this sensible is a new word that's used as a synonym of dangerous. And my concern, and the part I will drop for today, but is which sensitivity is at stake. How can we make experiences of train where sometimes we don't want to take the train because we think it will be terrible. It's just a local line, it's like, it's nothing, just a train. But sometimes you don't want to experience this. And I only told you about this station in Saint-Étienne. There I can go and make observation, but I always have a control of the police. when I stay half an hour, they come to me and they're like, what are you doing here? I'm like observing you and taking some notes. And then they're like, okay, if you observe us, we observe you. No, that's a stupid game. But at least in Saint-Étienne we can still do it. But in Lyon, it's not even possible. Like the context is really like you don't want to stay, you want to escape. And many people, from my friends, for example, they have strategies to avoid the station. They will go somewhere else, or they will take another train to avoid the station, even if it takes half an hour longer. Yes. I wanted to tell you about small adventures on the train, small observations. Just short before coming here, it was December the 14th. I have a meeting with a friend in the evening in Lyon, so I go and with something. I go and catch a train, and it's almost 8 p.m. I enter the station, and each corner stands a military pointing his weapon to me, except one, not to me, but to the center of the station. And in one corner stands 4 policemen. I'm surprised, I'm like, what's happening? I go to one policewoman, and I tell her, is there something bad happening? And then she looks at me and she's like, no, it's usual. Then I'm like, I was worried when I entered the station, I thought something bad was happening. And then she's like, you were worried? But it's supposed to reassure you. And then I'm like, to see a military in each corner pointing a weapon to me, I don't think that this makes me feel good. And but it's every day, every evening, it's like this. We are here in the corner and they are around. The high-speed train will arrive, so we need to watch. Usually the soldiers, they are a group together, and I've never seen them apart like this. I know it's soldiers, me and police. I have no clue how they organize and what they do, which for safety reasons makes you wonder. End of the discussion. They implemented some different atmosphere in the station. So when you are inside the station, they will ask you with big signs what would be your favorite atmosphere, have you tried a relaxing experience, and you will have a corner, actually a really relaxing place. But then the question is like, who is traveling with this state of mind, and who is feeling being a victim? And maybe I finish with it. This was a time I went just to the station to observe what was going on. I stayed there 2 hours. I do it from time to time. And I arrived to the station beginning of the afternoon. And I sit there 5 minutes. And 5 minutes later enter a young man, black skin, dressed up in black, with everything like black, everything. Then I'm like, let's note the time and see how long it takes before policemen will come. 6 minutes. And they arrive and they also point at him, there are 3 policemen, they also point at him with weapons and ask him to take out what he has in his pockets. The scene is pretty violent for me. I was at this moment, I was sitting in the relaxing corner. So then I moved from my relaxing corner to beside the situation because I think, okay, if I watch it, maybe it's better. Actually, the policemen were pretty nice to him. They just told him, you could try to be a bit more unnoticeable. And then after they left, and I talked with this boy, he was 19 years old, and since he was 14 years old, he was controlled by the police several times per week, each week of his life. So it's the reason why he decided to dress up like this, because he cannot be unnoticeable, like it was asked to him. And that was that's enough. Thank you for your attention.